Hello, welcome to the JCBS Multi-Tier Systems of Support, MTSS, Toolkit on Classroom Systems that Support Student Behavior. This is System 5. Today, we'll be discussing the topic of teacher expectations of performance. I am Josh Conzel, and today we also have Latoya Bryant. We both are MTSS Behavior Resource Teachers with Zone 2 Elementary. In the title, you will also find access to the Toolkit 5 in its entirety, which is full of high-yield practices, applications, and vignettes on classroom systems that support student behavior. Please take a moment to type the case-sensitive bit.ly into your web browser. This will allow you access to all information and links for future reference. Here, we have an alignment and show a structural core alignment between the 6 systems and 3 pillars in JCBS. This shows how all 6 systems work collaboratively together, not one in one silo, to best support our 3 pillars of culture climate, racial equity, backpack of success skills. In the outside tier, you see MTSS, multi-tier support systems. This shows how we work in collaboration together that best support the systems and the 3 pillars. Outlined here are the components of MTSS and how they align with our work within schools. The concept map of the departments within MTSS is here. We have 2 main departments within an MTSS. You have CDLI, Curriculum Design and Learning Innovation, which is led by Donna Lawson in MTSS Academic. Then you have Culture and Climate. And there are 3 departments in that field. You have MTSS Engagement, which is led by Dr. Naomi Ibrahim, MTSS Behavior, Sandra Hensel, and SEL and Trauma. Here are the 6 MTSS toolkits. By clicking the toolkit image, you will access the MTSS department webpage and each toolkit. Again, we are doing System 5, classroom systems that support behavior. In System 5, teachers use academic and behavioral data to prescribe short and long-term supports for students to meet and exceed standards and strengthen their sense of belonging. Our learning intentions for today is we'll develop a deeper understanding of how communicating high expectations and providing feedback impacts student achievement of performance in relation to those expectations. And there are 5 key considerations that we'll go through. First, communicate expectations appropriately. How we do so, what that looks like. Number 2, present reasonable challenges. We'll have different challenges based on each student's independent needs, individual needs. And then number 3, teach, prompt, and encourage student success. Number 4, how do we provide regular feedback on student progress? And number 5, we've accomplished the first 4 and ready to move on. What are some more engagement opportunities that lends itself once we set the path of strong expectations? Teachers impact student achievement and behavior simply by communicating high expectations and providing feedback on performance in relation to those expectations. These expectations, we want to make sure build upon one another, and it's not just classroom, but school-wide. Let's begin by discussing classroom practice number 1. Communicate expectations appropriately. Ask yourself these 3 questions. What is communication? How do you teach others to communicate? And what are expectations? Communication is a way to express needs and wants in a positive or negative way. Expectations are a specific form of communication that set parameters for student behavior success. They set the tone for what a classroom should look, sound, and feel like. Expectations are to be discussed, taught, and practice before they are to be implemented. In order to communicate expectations effectively, we must use restorative language. Now, one type of communication anyone can use in the school building is restorative language. This is a language that is intentionally used to build positive relationships and promote understanding. Underneath restorative language, there are 4 pieces. There's effective language, which is specific feedback that ties to a behavioral and to emotional reaction. Positive communication, that's your behavior-specific praise, verbal, nonverbal, or non-specific praise, which we'll dive in a little later. Restorative communication, the 4 R's, recognition, relationship, respect, responsibility. And then restorative questioning, quick questions to help process incidences and plan for repair. The latter, the last 2, are for a later presentation. But today, the most common is effective language. So let's dive in. So what are effective statements? Well, they're personal expressions of feeling in response to specific positive or negative behaviors of others. These are your I statements. Creating an understanding for the one who misbehaved, the impact of the hurtful behavior. You're truly separating the deed from the doer and teaching empathy in the language. This is where it's the behavior that you disagree with, not the actual student his or herself. Why should we use effective statements? This truly sets the boundaries. It does provide feedback so students are aware of what they are doing. And it teaches empathy, humanizes relationships between each individual. This allows that relationship to build, stay strong, and progress. So how do we use it? Well, there are 4 main areas with effective statements that we can look at and guide us through our process. There's observation, feelings, needs, and request. So observation, or what are we observing that what others are either saying or doing? What are people doing that we either like or don't like? No evaluation or judgment is needed at this time. In this example, in this picture, we might observe different things. In this case, I observe, when I see you swing sticks at each other, I feel. So now how do you feel when we observe the action? Hurt, scared, joyful, amused. So I feel scared. And I need, because I need everyone to be safe. Then request. I need you to put the sticks away. These last 2 statements are the most commonly misused. And the reason we put I need in both is for a purpose. We want to show you how they're closely related. The need is where you can put your expectation. So if you have a classroom expectation or school-wide expectation that you are really trying to address, you can state it here in the need statement. The request is in a follow-up of why. It gives you a quick statement of diving deeper of why you're stating that expectation. So again, when I see you swinging sticks at each other, I feel scared because I need everyone to be safe. I need you to put the sticks away. Very specific, to the point, and it's also humanizing it by telling that student how it's making you feel at that moment. This brings us to classroom practice number 2. We know that no single strategy will work for all students or in all situations. And punishing problem behavior is linked to increased aggression, vandalism, truancy, and dropouts. This is why, instead, we should correct behavior through a positive, proactive, and educative approach. This approach increases positive effect, level of confidence, and willingness to challenge oneself. Why we want to do this? Well, we need to be explicit about a continuum of strategies so we're able to correct minor behaviors in the classroom before they escalate to major behaviors and cause a loss of instructional time. We all know those situations. Poking the bear. making a small incident or a middle level incident even worse just because of the way we approached it. So there are some responses that we can be aware of. There's planned ignoring, physical proximity, signal nonverbal cues, direct eye contact, BSP, or behavior specific praise, which we'll get into a little bit, redirection, support for procedures, routines, reteaching, differential reinforcement, specific and contingent error correction. You provide choice, and then have conferencing with students. When choosing response practice, use least resource intensive practice possible to achieve the objective. You should focus on consistency and patience when responding to behavior. These response practices should communicate with support, caring, and relationship building. The classroom practice is not a list of punishments, public shaming of the student, or a privilege level system. All students should have fair and equal response practices when responding to behaviors. Be aware, and be aware that as you are using the continuum, some behaviors may escalate. It is important to be aware of what those behaviors may be and how we respond to them appropriately. There are 9 variables that affect compliance. We want students to even move past just following expectations and acting with appropriate behavior out of compliance and into authentic engagement. In order to increase compliance, which leads to engagement, you can use these 9 variables in your classroom. Keep in mind, some work better for some students than others. A lot of what will work for each student requires you to build a relationship with each student and get to know them. These variables include using a question format, distance, 2 requests, the loudness of the request, the timing of the request, more start requests instead of stop requests, non-emotional instead of emotional requests, descriptive requests, and then reinforcing the compliance. Be mindful that teacher behavior affects desired outcomes in student behavior. Escalation of student behavior is when students feel signaled out. Our responsibility is to be aware and respond appropriately. In the next video, we will show examples of noncompliance and how we appropriately engage.
As with other misbehaviors, responses should be done privately as much as possible so as not to provide undue attention and distract other students. However, it is important to continue to acknowledge students that are on task and complying. Non-compliant students should be addressed with a single direction. Tell them exactly what you need to see from them. These students often will have several reasons why it's not possible or reasonable to follow the directions, but we should be a broken record and keep repeating the direction. It's helpful here to simply say that we're willing to help with all other issues and problems, but first the student needs to follow the first direction. When a direction has been followed, we can provide assistance and then make a follow-up request. Each new request being another step in full compliance with the task at hand. In the end, either the student complies and receives a nod of thanks, or does not and receives the standard consequence. Let's take a look at a video scenario involving non-compliant behavior. As you watch, think about the keys to addressing non-compliance and see if you can spot the times that the teacher makes errors in response to this student's behavior.
Class?
Yes.
Class?
Yes, yes.
All right, it's time to start our letters. You have 20 minutes. I'm going to start the timer now. Please begin. Sydney, get out your paper and get started.
I don't understand.
We discussed it. You know the assignment. Get started.
I don't have a paper.
I gave everyone a paper. You do have a paper. Get it out and get started.
I don't have a pencil.
You have a pencil in your desk. Get it out and get started.
I'm not using this.
You are going to use it or you're going to get a 0.
I'll go to my locker then.
No, sit down and use the pencil and the paper that I gave you and get started.
Discuss how the teacher handled this situation. In light of the keys that have been presented, make a list of things you think the teacher could or should have done differently to increase the probability of this student's compliance. team discussion, you probably noted that the teacher's conversation with the student was done mostly across the room, dragging in other students as spectators. But mostly, the teacher was simply arguing with the student, allowing the student to lead the discussion and continue avoiding work. In the end, the conflict escalated to the point that the student simply raised the stakes in order to get kicked out of class. Let's take a look at how the teacher might have handled this in a much more effective manner.
Class?
Yes.
Class?
Yes, yes.
Time to get started on our letters. We've gone over the directions. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
All right, go ahead and get started. You have 20 minutes. Sydney, why are you not started?
I don't understand.
If you go ahead and get your paper out and go ahead and write your greeting, I'll come over and help you with the directions.
I don't have a pencil.
If you have a pencil on your desk, please get it out and get started.
I don't want to use this.
Okay, if you'll get a paper out, go ahead and get started. Start on your greeting. I'll go find you a better pencil. Does that work? Sounds good. Here we go. Did you have a question about the assignment? Okay, what do you not understand?
Well, I wasn't here for the morning, so I don't understand.
If I gave you an example, would it help? A couple students said that they weren't a fan of Thanksgiving because you eat leftovers for a week and they don't even like turkey, so that was their least favorite. Okay, so can you think of something? One of the holidays, it can be any holiday, and you write about what is your least favorite tradition of that holiday. Does that make sense? Go ahead and get started.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You probably noticed that in this version, the teacher remained calm and stuck with a repeated, single, simple direction to get student compliance. Once the student followed an initial direction, the teacher provided another single direction that continued the student on in the direction of being compliant with a larger set of expectations. Here's a task for you to consider. Think about students you have had or currently have in your classroom that have problems with disrespectful, disruptive, or non-compliant behavior, and consider the following. What pre-teaching is in place regarding this problem? Does this behavior result in increased peer or adult attention, or the stopping of instruction? Which of the keys for addressing this behavior have you tried when confronted with it in the school?
So now that you have had time to watch the video and think about the task, now we're going to move on into the third classroom practice. So the third classroom practice is encouraging appropriate behavior. Appropriate behavior comes from a set of practices that instruct what is expected, communicates positive examples, gives specific feedback while motivating students. It uses reinforcers to promote a growth mindset and community inclusion. And it teaches classroom expectations and pre-correct or prompt students to set them up for success. These are some strategies for encouraging appropriate behavior. Let's take a minute to look them over as I read them out loud. 1, introduce the expectation during a neutral time and provide a rationale. 2, embed expectations into daily lessons and activities. Post the expectations with large font and refer to it often. Model what the expectation looks like and discuss non-examples. Practice with students and provide specific feedback. Acknowledge students who demonstrate the expected behavior. And then lastly, prompt or pre-correct and review as often as necessary. So here are a couple of questions you can ask yourself when reflecting on this work. Allow 3 minutes for you to discuss with an elbow partner, or allow 2 minutes to share out ideas from your partner groups. So how much time do you spend correcting student behavior? And what can you explicitly name as responses for re-engaging students? Take some time to reflect. All right. It is important to provide appropriate feedback. Feedback can be positive, corrective, or negative. So first, positive feedback is positive acknowledgement is the presentation of something pleasant or rewarding immediately following a behavior. It makes that behavior more likely to occur in the future and is one of the most powerful tools for shaping or changing behavior. Corrective feedback is brief, informative statement following the occurrence of an undesired behavior that specifies what the learner should do differently in the future. And then negative feedback tells the student what they are doing wrong, but provides no description of what the student is expected to do instead. So positive or corrective ratio of positive interactions. Negative responses will occur. Remind yourself to remain positive when correcting student behavior. Make sure the staff understands the importance of monitoring their RPI so they can adjust their practice if need be. So the ratio of interactions should be quantifiable so that it can be analyzed and modified. You will want to be able to self-monitor your ratios of interactions, collect and analyze data on your RPI. And remember, it is important to have a clear understanding of what classifies an interaction as positive or corrective. So then there's behavior-specific praise. It's a great way to use language to reduce challenges and help our students engage and feel confident. It's a low-intensity tactic that reinforces appropriate behavior. It occurs when a teacher observes a positive student behavior and praises the student for their appropriate behavior with the goal of the student continuing the positive behavior, while giving feedback about performance and building relationships. So one tip for successful behavior-specific praise is to be authentic and genuine in your tone. So let's check out some examples of behavior-specific praise. So an example would be, Jamal, I appreciate you making more of an effort to put your dishes in the sink. Then a non-example of behavior-specific praise would be, why can't you ever put your dishes in the sink? So in general, when giving behavior-specific praise, there should be a 4-to-1 ratio of praise to corrective statements. But if your students are trauma exposed, a 40-to-1 ratio is necessary. So on average, using 6 praise statements every 15 minutes is also recommended. So why should we use behavior-specific praise? It takes little effort and costs nothing. It improves student-teacher relationships. It's not time-consuming or intrusive. It increases on-task behavior and reduces problem behavior. And it increases positive social and academic behaviors. There are 5 P's of behavior-specific praise. A praise statement must be linked to a behavior. The statement has to be linked to a behavior so that the behavior will continue. Provide specific feedback to the behavior. The behavior needs to be related. The feedback needs to be related to the behavior that you see. It should be positive and genuine. The praise has to be upbeat and sincere because it will be more meaningful to students. Students know when you are not being sincere. Your praise effort, you're going to praise their effort, not their ability. So that praise that they worked hard, not that they are smart. We want to instill to students that it is about working hard in life, not so much about being smart. And then you must have a personal connection. Students must feel that the praise was personal to them and differentiated. Educators already differentiate instruction, so one must already differentiate praise as well. Try to make each praise meaningful to students and use a variety of praise statements. So now that you have set clear behavioral expectations while using the continuum of appropriate responses, students can now engage in academic tasks that increase accurate responses and desired behaviors while decreasing undesired behavioral outcomes. These opportunities to respond allow for multiple students to be involved in thinking and problem solving rather than one at a time. So the purpose is to maximize the simultaneous involvement of all students through strategies and questions to solicit group responses. So important note is that implementing higher rates of OTR results in an increased amount of engagement opportunities. So there are benefits of engagement opportunities. There are many benefits to giving student multiple engagement opportunities. These include increases in on-task behavior, increases academic and learning outcomes, and allows for differentiated responses. Getting multiple responses allows for students to begin facilitating learning along with various ways of critical thinking strategies. So the goal is to use group strategies for a majority of the opportunities to respond during instruction. Identify strategies that fit within the lesson plan. So for example, use of response cards, dry erase boards, smartboard, response clickers and apps, choral response, think, pair, share, and other cooperative learning strategies. One example could be all students write their answer to a math problem on a small whiteboard and hold them up for the teacher to see. Take a look at the other two examples given. Let's look at things to consider when planning for these opportunities. They include teacher talk accounting for no more than 40 to 50% of instructional time. Use wait time of 5 seconds to allow for processing and encourage engagement. And then share strategies and practice group opportunities to respond to skills in the grade department teams and PLC staff. Now, I'm going to show you a video clip. In the following video, we'll look at how we use opportunities to respond to develop active engagement.
Remember when you were in school? There were times when it was all you could do to keep from falling asleep. Sometimes the lesson content can be really boring for your students, even though it's critically important to what you're teaching. One thing we know from research on effective instruction is that student achievement is linked to their engagement during the lesson. The more engaged our students are when we're teaching, the more they'll understand and remember. And as a bonus, research shows that students who are engaged with instruction are less likely to be disruptive. What does it mean to say that students are engaged? To be sure, that's a difficult question. Sometimes it's so hard to tell because we all know it's possible for students to be looking right at you, even nodding as you speak, and yet not be hearing a word you say. Their body is there, but their mind is elsewhere. When students are at least looking in the direction of the teacher and not causing disruptions, we refer to this as passive engagement, or sometimes we say the student is on task. But we really don't know if the student is on task unless we see him or her interacting with a curriculum. Active engagement means that the students are actively taking part in the lesson. This activity can take many forms. The key is that the students are being asked to think and apply, even in very simple ways throughout the lesson. Can you tell from these pictures which students are actively engaged and which are passively engaged? While the passively engaged students might be attending, the actively engaged students are obviously engaging with the lesson in some physical manner. And it's this type of engagement that is highly predictive of achievement. When lessons are super exciting or interesting, students can be passively engaged in a meaningful manner. Unfortunately, not everything we teach has enough pizzazz to be exciting for everyone. In these cases, it's especially important to facilitate active engagement.
So now let's reflect. So let's reflect on the 6 classroom practices we discussed in the presentation, and then let's think about these reflection questions. What is one thing you are taking away? What has reinforced or challenged your thinking from today? And what questions do you still have? So if you need any more information or if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Naomi Brahim, and her email is down at the bottom of your screen. For more information about MTSS behavior classroom management modules, please visit the following website. And if you need more information about the MTSS toolkits and other high-yield practices, please visit their website. So thank you for joining us today to look at the classroom systems that support student learning.